So there's a lot of promises behind clouds, but there's also a lot of potential risks behind clouds. You know, everybody's saying, oh, it will solve all the problems. It may will, it maybe will not. Because there's also some really, let's say, challenges, adopting challenges of clouds, and customers ask themselves questions like, will it interoperate with my environment? Will it be secure? Will the software vendor actually, will they be reliable? Will they lock me in? When you think about lock-in, if you think you're today locked in with a Microsoft or with an Oracle or with an IBM or whoever you have, you know, as a supplier, if you think about cloud, cloud could become the mother of all lock-ins. Could be the biggest lock-in you ever have pretty much seen in your life, because if you have everything there, you know, also your data, also your hardware, also all your software, and you're truly locked in, and you cannot switch from a Google to an Amazon, from an Amazon to a Rackspace, from a Rackspace to whatever, to a Polish telecom offering a public cloud, or German telecom, whoever the cloud provider is, guess what will happen? You know, there's a lock-in, and they will just jump up prices, and at the end, and you will not have a true added value, and you will not get the right benefits out of your environment. So there's a big, big risk. So there's quite some, you know, uncertainties around this, and these challenges are actually the reason why customers choose open source in cloud environments. When you look at the majority of public clouds right now in the world, most of them are built on open source technology. Why? Because it's so much more flexible, and especially it's also standards-based, which is very, very important, okay? So when you look at, you know, Amazon is probably the leader in the cloud space. They started very early. Everything they did was built on open source technology, because they had the flexibility to also develop their own tools and adopt it, because everything was open and standards-based, okay? So that's the reason why many, many companies go this way when it comes down to cloud. So what is our play as Red Hat, you know, and why we think we are playing an important role, and what are the advantages with open source? Key thing is, if you're going to a cloud environment, it's not like switching flipping a switch, you know, going from one environment to the other environment. It's not a revolution. It's clearly an evolutionary process. But if you want to do an evolutionary process, you need an environment which helps you with going, you know, step by step, you know, on this path to a cloud environment, so that you are not forced to rip and replace your existing environment. So it's very important that all the components you have work with each other, okay? So that you have a true open architectures, you know, that your virtualization technology not necessarily locks you in. They're saying you must use this virtualization technology throughout your whole environment, that you also have the possibility that you can run a Microsoft environment parallel to a VMware environment, parallel to a Red Hat environment. And on top of it, run multiple operating systems, be it a Linux operating system, be it Microsoft or others, or same from the middleware, same from the management tool, and same from the applications. So very important that you have an architecture which allows you to do an evolutionary process and not a revolution, because it will not be a revolution, and nobody will completely rip and replace a complete environment. So a unique, absolute unique value which we provide as Red Hat as a company and the leader within open source is ensuring portability also in clouds. Because I said clouds can be the biggest login which you have seen. It means if you cannot port your applications and your environment from one cloud environment to the other cloud environment, it will be very hard. It will be not a healthy environment. So we have created a standard already over 2 years ago, which is called Delta Cloud. And the whole purpose of this Delta Cloud API is to ensure portability between clouds. Because every cloud right now has their own API. So if you want to do some specific workloads, let's say you want to do a failover of an application in the Amazon cloud, if you want to do this, you have to write specific code to the Amazon API. If you want to do this with Google, you have to write to the Google API. If you want to do this with IBM, you have to write to the IBM API. If you want to do this with Rackspace, you have to write to the Rackspace API. and so on. These APIs are not the same. They are differences. So you cannot just switch. So what the Delta Cloud API does is pretty much putting an abstraction layer, so have a one common interface to the application, and Delta Cloud then within itself has adapters to the different cloud providers. So there's an adapter for Amazon, there's an adapter for vCloud, there's an adapter for Rackspace, an adapter for IBM, to exactly abstract these differences so that computing becomes portable, which is absolutely essential. Think about this for a minute, about this concept, being potentially locked into a cloud, not being able to get out. You don't even want to, think about what the consequences potentially are. So that's why we're driving this very, very hard from a standards perspective, and really making sure that customers understand the risk behind clouds. There's a huge potential, and we want to leverage and enable the potential, but also make everybody aware there's a big risk if you don't do it the right way. Okay? So it's all around portability towards the cloud. When you see what are customers mainly doing today, many customers talk about clouds, but fundamentally what they're doing is virtualization. Where virtualization is not necessarily over a cloud environment. Virtualization is clearly the first step to do your hardware abstraction, which is a very important step, but it's just hardware abstraction. It's not yet that you're truly in a cloud environment. In a second step then, you start abstracting your virtual resources, because you have multiple virtual, let's say, clusters, which you have to get again into one compute pool. That's where then private cloud comes into play, where you have an abstraction layer on top of the virtual resources, which then you orchestrate and you use the different resources. And the third step is towards public cloud, that you add more or less a public cloud to the mix of your resource pool. Okay? And this all needs to be portable, flexible, that you can go easy from one environment to the other environment, that you don't have to recertify. Give you another example of like a promise we're giving as Red Hat. If an application is certified against Red Hat Enterprise Linux, it is certified no matter how the application is deployed, be it bare metal, be it in a virtual environment, or be it with a public cloud provider who is certified with Red Hat. So you can move the applications from one environment to the other without worrying about will it still be supported, will it still run, because that's exactly a certification which we, and a guarantee which we give. So very important on the journey to cloud environments. To get some external confirmation, IDC, clearly endorsed our concept by saying 80% of enterprises cite the lack of interoperability standards as a challenge in adopting cloud computing services. With Cloud Foundation, Red Hat is on the right track with cloud by accelerating interoperability and portability to prevent cloud lock-in. Okay, also there IDC is clearly endorsing this. Giving you a real customer example, DreamWorks. I assume everybody knows DreamWorks, especially people who have kids. They know the movies Shrek and so on. When they produce a new movie and the movie needs to get rendered, it requires enormous compute power. Really, they need thousands of machines, calculating, rendering the film. And this is always, it's not happening pretty much 365 days a year. It always has peaks, because they don't create a new movie every single day. Okay? So they have at certain times, especially before Christmas, extreme workloads. Okay? So what they are doing, and what they have done together with us, they first built kind of a private cloud where they have multiple resources, virtual resources, which then when they need to render a film, put together like in one big cluster using our management tools, so that all the resources act like, as one big compute cluster for rendering the film. Now if they suddenly need an additional, whatever, 100, 200 servers, whatever the amount is, they just go out directly from the management interface to Amazon and provision another 100 servers, put them in, pretty much get them into their pool, get the application on it, have them as part of compute resources within their cluster, have them for whatever, a week or two, whatever the time frame is, calculate the film, or render the film, and then when they're done, they just give it back. And this all happens in a matter of minutes and hours to provision a couple of 100 or 200 new machines. So extremely effective, extremely flexible for this specific environment, because it doesn't make sense for them to, again, purchase new servers just for being able to get the film out in time. So it's a very interesting use case scenario of like a hybrid cloud where a customer has a private cloud, and then for certain workloads or certain peaks, they go out to a public cloud provider and provision additional machines. All done based on open source and REDHAT-based technologies. Okay, very, very interesting scenario. So, my famous, always last slide, when I talk about REDHAT strategy, is my nice fishbowl. I always say, before the fish jump from left to right, I at least hope he made himself up a kind of a strategy to make sure he lands, in the bowl with his, his or a friend or her friend, I don't know. And we as Red Hat, we also have kind of I think a clear strategy, because we want to be definitely part and then a key player within this new paradigm. Because when there's a big paradigm shift, usually the former leaders of the current paradigm are not the leaders of the new paradigm. That's true for IT. It's also true in other areas. So we are convinced that Microsoft will not be the leading company in the new paradigm. Because then the new paradigm, you're talking about companies like Google, like Facebook, and others. And we clearly, as Red Hat, we want to be part of a key player in this new paradigm as well, and want to lead you as a customer, help you to this new paradigm by adding value, providing technology and consulting services, to make this really a journey, make this an evolutionary process, make this not a revolution, by truly adding value, doing it in an open way, based on open source technology, so that it stays affordable. And at the end, help you closing the gap between this increased demand and these limited resources which you have on an ongoing basis. And if you don't watch out and do the right things, you will not solve this problem. So again, by more adopting open source technology, by adopting a value-based business model, and by also implementing more and more cloud architectures for delivering IT services, with this, I think you have a high success to succeed, fulfilling the high demand with your limiting resources. With this, thank you very much, and I'm sure you should be ready to own the new now. And now I can introduce my good old friend, Sean Doherty from Enterprise DB, but Greg is coming first. He wants to say something. Thank you very much.